Welcome to Fire Your Hiring Habits with John Mitchell. This is the place where we dive into the world of talent acquisition, explore the challenges of today's workplace, and discover what it takes to build a thriving and successful organization.
My guest today is Melody Wilding, a human behavior professor, award-winning executive coach, and author of the new book, Managing Up: How to Get What You Need from the People in Charge. With a unique approach blending psychology, neuroscience, and professional development, she empowers individuals to build meaningful careers by navigating workplace dynamics with confidence and emotional intelligence. Melody, welcome to the show.
Thrilled to be here. Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about your background first so people can get to know you a little bit, if that's all right. How do you find yourself? What led you to pursue a career in at the intersection of psychology, neuroscience, professional development? I'm assuming that's not on the normal high school counselor path.
Not really. Not really. You have to pave your own way in this field. I really was led to psychology first and foremost because I've always been a people watcher, always just wanted to understand how people tick, why do they do what they do. And, flash forward, I started out my career as a therapist. And at the time, I was working for the very, very first online therapy company before all the ones we know today were available. And because of that, the folks I was working with were a lot of startup founders, tech executives, so very high achieving, driven people that didn't want therapy in the traditional sense. They didn't want to unpack their childhood, but they wanted to understand how psychology operates in the workplace, managing their own reactions to situations and insecurities, and also being able to influence other people, motivate their team, or having to give bad feedback to someone and not wanting them to quit, whatever the situation was. And so that's really what, over the last 13 years now, my work has really lived at that intersection of helping people master their own psychology and influence that of others.
Awesome. All right. So I have a question about this. An award-winning career coach. Um, so is there a competition for career coaches?
Well, a few years ago, Business Insider ran a competition of sorts where they were asking for nominations for the most innovative career coaches. And very thankfully, my community rallied. I guess enough people put in a vote for me. And here we are.
So what makes an innovative career coach versus a non-innovative career coach?
Well, I really try to pride myself on a few things. I love giving people very, very practical, actionable tactics because I think the career leadership management space is full of a lot of platitudes and one-liners. And we're told things like, well, be empathetic and have self-awareness. But how? How do you actually do that on a day-to-day basis when you have different pressures and priorities happen? So I love to live in the space of the how. And I also it's really important to me that we bring the human dynamics part into our career management because, now more than ever,
We
it's
do. We work with humans, right? It's not
yeah,
just we're not just turning cranks all the time. We actually work with each other.
exactly. And this is something that AI can't do is manage the human dynamics, the nonverbal, read between the lines. And so this skill is only going to become more and more important as time goes on.
Okay. So as an innovative career coach or the most innovative of career coaches, what how do you describe that to somebody? So they're picking between you and Melody, 1.0, and they're saying, "So you're innovative. What's the difference?"
Yeah. My sort of signature approach that really emanated from my first book is I've specialized over time working with people. I call them sensitive strivers. So these are people who are deep thinking and feeling. They're also very driven. And so a lot of what that nomination came from was that sort of
Got it.
distinction I
Okay.
have of working with people in that space who are usually told stop being this way. Stop being so sensitive. Stop taking everything so personally. Of course, we all have room for growth, but I'm a huge believer, and I've seen it time and time again, that actually that sort of EQ and perceptiveness makes you so much more
Yeah,
effective, especially when it comes to managing up.
100%. I'm reminded of the line from You've Got Mail with Meg Ryan saying, "They always say it's just business, but it's personal."
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
so what did I'm just going to solicit just a little snippet. Don't feel like, don't give away all the secret sauce, but say someone is dealing with a difficult boss. What kind of advice would you give somebody like that? As you're coaching them, saying, "Okay, we've got this oppressive boss,
Mm.
whoever she or he may be."
Yeah. Well, this may be a little, provocative for some people or
We
confronting.
love provocative.
Yeah, confronting for some people, let me put it that way, that the vast majority of the time, when someone says they have a difficult boss, what they mean is their boss is different from them. That's really important. I don't say that to mean that there are not toxic bosses out there. There absolutely are, very oppressive, abusive, and thankfully, those are few and far between.
And
But
hopefully diminishing all the time.
that's right. That's right. Thanks to shows like this.
Yes.
But what I mean by that is most of the time, what we perceive as difficult behavior is a difference in styles.
Yeah.
And so you may be someone who is very, very detail oriented, and your boss is a big picture visionary type who has a lot of different ideas.
Yeah,
But
guilty as charged. I was just like, don't bother me with the details. Just go make that happen."
yes, and I'm the details person who
Yeah.
may get frustrated by someone
Hey,
who's
hey, he's not paying attention. He doesn't care what I'm doing.
so scattered, can't give me a straightforward answer to save his life. Or we have people who may be a very direct communicator who may respond to emails with, okay, thanks. And the person on the other end who's more of a warmer, expressive type thinks, do they hate me? Am I getting fired? What's going on here? And so those style differences create so much tension. But if we can understand what are our own preferences and inclinations here, and also decode that of the people around us, particularly the person who, oversees our work and our paycheck, it's going to go really far to helping you manage your own overthinking and emotional reaction and also putting their behavior in context instead of taking it personally or spiraling about it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think of those. I don't know if you've seen these reels where it's like there's an app that will translate. Often I see it in couple or relationship things where like, uh, the wife wants to hear the flowery language, and so the husband types a text that says "sounds great," and it goes back and it's like 3 paragraphs when it gets to his wife or whatever. So understanding what the way people want to hear and the way you hear, so you can translate back and forth, I think is critical. That's great. Very helpful. Thank you. So let's delve a little bit more into your background before we get into the book.
Yeah.
Who's been a major influence or mentor in your career journey, and what did you learn from them?
Such a great question. I think the people I have the people I've learned from the most, ironically, have been the most what I would say the most difficult people, and
Oh.
who I perceived as the most difficult people because they taught me the most about myself, my own, triggers and patterns and areas I needed to work on. And so, I think someone influencing your career path can go 2 ways. They can
Mhm.
sort of inspire you by example, but I think and I tell the story of, a difficult leader I worked with inside of the book. And when I think back, that was a very formative experience because it taught me to stand up for myself, how to negotiate, how to um, have a point of view instead of flip flopping when I was presenting an idea. It taught me so many important skills about how to operate with different personalities that I think still serve me today. And while I did eventually say this is not the place for me, I'm not going to be able to be successful here, and I left. Those skills still stick with me. So I don't regret those experiences. I think they
Mhm.
were a stepping stone
They're
to
instructive.
yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think of, there's the kinds of people where you look up to and you go, "Oh, I wanna be just like her. She's so organized," or "She's this together," or, somebody else you sit there and go, "I'm gonna live my entire life to prove that that method is wrong."
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Very good. So, what's the most surprising feedback you've received from your readers or clients about your work before we get to, talking about the book?
Yeah. Well, I'll split this into I don't wanna say the good and the bad, but I think the most surprising feedback I've heard is that this has totally changed how I think about managing up. Because most people, when they read the title, they see "Managing Up: How to Get What You Need from the People in Charge," and they're immediately skeptical because that sounds like a lot of work. Why should I have to be the one to compensate for my boss's shortcomings? Right?
Yeah.
There's that immediate defensiveness that this should not be something I have
Why
to
do I
do.
have to work on them? That's their job.
That's their job. They should be better. And uh, both and leaders, we should hold them to a higher standard. And of course, if you are in a leadership position, I hope that you are driven to work on yourself. But at the same time, I think the most surprising shift I've heard from readers is that they come out of the book thinking, I get it now. I get it that managing up is actually not about my boss at all. It's about me getting what I need
Yeah.
despite their shortcomings.
Yeah.
And so they
It's
still made
taking control. It's
yes.
instead of relinquishing control and saying, "Boy, I sure hope," it's saying, "No, if I want these things, here's the things I need to do." Yeah,
That's right. It's
makes totally
it's
sense.
looking for areas where you have agency, where currently you might feel helpless or just at the whim of everything that's happening around you.
Yeah, very good. So, before writing Managing Up, you wrote a book called Trust Yourself. How does Managing Up build upon your previous work?
Yeah. Well, Trust Yourself was the book where I really defined that sort of sensitive striver persona. And that book is really the managing your own psychology. It goes very deep into how do you work with your own insecurities, get over your doubts, and the areas where you are getting in your own way. And that book came out in the middle of 2021.
Mhm.
And what was interesting is that over and over again, what I would hear from readers is great. I feel more confident in myself now. I feel like I'm putting myself out there more. I'm able, to articulate myself more clearly. But the problem is, this breaks down in when I'm dealing with someone who has higher authority than me. And it was so interesting because I didn't predict that at all. But it was a pattern again and again that, okay, this is all great. I feel better, except in this situation. And so there was something there to me that what I noticed was that people were attributing their overthinking, rereading their boss's email 10 times or feeling preoccupied about something after work hours or being a people pleaser, not being able to say no to requests that were coming down from leadership. They were attributing all of that to their character. Like, this is just how I am. This is something I need to work on. And what I realized is actually this comes down to a very learnable skill set of being able
Yeah.
to influence, persuade, push back on others, and in other words, managing up. So that was really the path that eventually led to this new book.
You talk about managing up, and obviously it's the title of the book, but why is this skill essential for career success?
It's interesting because a few weeks ago, I wrote an article for Forbes that has gone semi-viral, and it talks about why managing up is the most crucial career skill for 2025. And so in there, I mentioned something we touched on a moment ago about how AI can handle a lot of tasks now. But what it can't handle or interpret is the human dynamics. And so more and more, managing the relationships around you is going to become a competitive advantage. And not only that, but the visibility gap is starting to widen because as we're many people are still fully remote, hybrid, you're working with a distributed team that may be across the world. Maybe you've never even met your boss in person. And so all of our interaction is happening in much more fractured form, which means that the live time you get with someone is that much more precious and that much more important to shape their perception of you. So we have to do more with less time. And, leaders are more stressed. They have more demands on them than ever before. That trickles down to you. right? It becomes more and more important that you do know how to work with a boss who has a million priorities, and you're at the receiving end of that. And so bosses are going to continue to be more stressed, and we need to be able to manage up against that reality. The idea of having a singular boss is also going away
Right.
because I don't know about you, but I talk to so many people every day that have multiple managers, are in a matrixed environment,
I
have
have 19 bosses right now.
yes. Yeah, right. Project
Literally.
leads. Yeah. Yeah, project leads, clients, right? And so it's no yes, your boss is your number one customer and all that, but they're not the only person who controls your future. And so if we think about managing up in this very narrow way, then we're missing out.
Yeah. As you talk about that, I think of how, um, when I am trying to work with somebody, you talked about earlier about understanding personality traits, et cetera. And, I had the opportunity long time ago, previous CEO of AT&T, I had a call with him, and I knew I've did some of my homework before. What's his personality? What's the style? If I've got 30 minutes, should I do this in 15? Is he going to and I learned all these things before going in and meeting with him. And we did a 15-minute meeting. And as I'm walking out, he's like, "Hey, I really appreciate that you were just, he was, as you were talking about, direct. I'm not interested in the fluff. What do you want? Why do you think I should give it to you, et cetera?" And just going, we just bang, 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 bang. And it was a very productive meeting. But again, as you talk about the shorter time that we have, it's almost like it's orange juice concentrate, right? It's like all of a sudden we got to pack it all into this moment. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I've got the split second, go, and then you've got to be on, and then you're out, and as you go
Yes.
forward. So it's a challenging environment that we're in.
It's a challenging environment, and a lot of people overlook some of those everyday opportunities. One area where this comes up a lot is visibility, where I was just coaching a client the other day who was saying, I have these hallway encounters with this executive, and I either ramble and feel like I'm boring them and they lose steam, or I say nothing. And imagine if you could come into that situation. I call this a pocket update. Can you have just a 30-second little snippet that when someone asks you, hey, how's it going? What have you been up to? You don't just say, oh, yeah, I've been busy. It's crazy start to the year. You actually say, oh, it's been really exciting. We're working on this new AI project. It's showing a lot of promise. Happy to talk to you more about that. Like what you can do with that little bit of time can be night and day.
That's
Yeah.
a great hand. So in the book, you have, I believe, 10 key conversations that you outline in the book.
Yeah.
Which of those 10 do you think is the most challenging for most professionals, and why?
Ooh, great question. Um, oh, if I had to pick, I think I would say the boundaries or the feedback conversation. I think they're both equally difficult.
Explain just synopsis of what the principle is, or the
Yes.
conversation is, and then why you think that might be difficult.
Yes. Okay. The boundaries conversation is all about how do you push back diplomatically? I think this is difficult for many
Yeah.
reasons.
It's your boss. They told you to do this. She said,
Yes.
"Hey, XYZ," and you're like, "Oh, wait."
Yes, we have the power dynamic, right? That's what a direct report is supposed to do. You're supposed to follow orders. And also we live or we're operating now in work cultures that are very team oriented. And so you want to look like a team player. You don't want to look like you're entitled and not willing to pitch in.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's hard to find the words because usually your manager is asking you to do something else because they're already stressed. And so you don't want to say no and then make it worse and have them explode at you. So, for that reason, I think that one is very emotionally loaded for people.
Okay, that makes sense. So, in the book, you also emphasize understanding your boss's needs and motivation. Are there practical steps that employees can take to achieve this?
Yeah.
Just a couple of hints there on that one.
Yeah. The entire book starts with
Sorry, before
the,
you answer,
yeah.
for those of you listening, buy the book and get all of these answers. We're just teasing you with these things here.
Yes, and the entire book starts with exactly what you're saying, getting in your boss's head, the alignment conversation. You have to start there because if you don't understand the North Star you should be working towards, you're always going to feel like you're spinning your wheels or you're sidelined. The other reason why this is the first conversation is because it's kind of an easy entryway. It involves asking a lot of good questions and listening and observing. So, for the person who may be a little shy about putting themselves out there, asserting themselves, it's a good place to start because it's really about asking great questions. And some of my favorite that I share in that chapter, one that I have really liked over the years is
Mhm.
what metrics does your boss discuss with you most often? And how are those measured? Because we don't our manager may say yes, blah 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 is a priority, but we don't understand why. And managing up works well when you can do two things. When you can help your boss look good in front of other people, particularly their own leadership, and second, when you can save them any type of cognitive load or cognitive energy. And so asking a question like that or, what if you flash forward 3 months, what would you be so excited to say that we had accomplished? Or in terms of value creation, impact for the team, what would you like to see me work on? Even asking like if you had more time, what's something you would love to be tackling? Again, it starts to get under the hood of what your manager may be explicitly saying. You have to excavate what might be under the surface.
Yeah, that's great. And there's gains obtained by having those conversations as well. They're like, "Oh, they really wanna understand." They're not just taking blind orders, they're trying to understand what we're really trying to achieve here, and when you do that, not only have you strengthened the relationship with your boss, your team, your supervisor, whatever it may be, um, but you've also given yourself the ability to be more creative in the solutions that you're coming up with instead of saying, well, I'm supposed to make this paper airplane with these folds. It's like, no, that wasn't the goal at all. The goal was to get this paper across the chasm here. We didn't really care about whether it was shaped as an airplane or not. So I love there's just so many dimensions to just that one. One of the other ones that I think is a challenging conversation for some people, and I would venture to say most people, how do you recommend readers approach the money conversation when negotiating raises or promotions? I hear that all the time. We've had, a lot of inflation over the last few years in terms of, cost pressures that are in your cost of living. Housing costs have gone up, rents have gone up, food has gone up. So, how do you have that conversation with those who control your salary?
Yeah, money is definitely a loaded one.
It's a stressor, right?
It's a stressor, I think, for both sides
Yeah.
because you have to remember that your manager probably can't make decisions about these things on the spot. And that's important because I see a lot of people get into like the performance review trap where the first time they bring up any sort of advancement or money is at their performance review. And then their manager is taken aback because they say, I didn't know this. And
Like, it
now
wasn't in the budget. That budget was 2 months ago.
exactly, exactly. And so you have to be planting seeds. But when it comes to money in particular, we hear a lot about, show your value, justify your value, track your accomplishments. That is a big part of what I talk about in this book. That's only one half of the equation, though, to making a case for a bigger salary. Yes, you have to prove what you've already done, show you have a track record, show you have capability and credibility, but you also have to make a case for what is the future ROI. If they give you more money, what are they going to get in exchange for that? So, if you are promoted to a director level, does that mean you can take on two more direct reports and that's going to increase capacity and speed up, growth towards whatever initiative? But that's important because your manager needs to go to their own leadership and make that case. So, if you can get ahead of that, that's going to go a very long way to making your case more convincing.
That's great. That goes back to what you talked about earlier, reducing the cognitive load on your supervisor. like, here's the answers. You can just carry these with you and go hand them off over here. I also love that you use the term ROI. So I believe all of our listeners know, but not everybody thinks in terms, you use the lingo of management, right? When talking with management. So I think speaking and trying to communicate in their language also helps with that. So you did that very naturally, but you know, they have to go, like you said, they have to go and justify this change and saying, oh, by the way, I mean, I have a humorous example that I think I shared in my book, but maybe I didn't. When we were changing the culture at our organization, one of the things that the staff wanted to change was the dress code. I had just joined the organization that year, and one of the questions was, "Can we wear jeans at work?" And I asked the entire all staff. I said, "So, how much more productive will we be if we wear jeans at work?" And one person raised their hand, "Oh, 10%." And I was like, "Really?" And another person, 25%. One person, 100%. I was like, "So?" And then I went to the next slide, and we had already approved going that way because it didn't make any difference. It was just like, as long as we might have to wear a little nicer clothes when clients are in or something like that. But day-to-day work, we were virtual practically anyway. So it was, it's just kind of, but they were talking the language of, what do I get for what you're asking, type of thing. How does this help? And it's not what your boss gets. It's what, again, going back to understanding what the real objectives are. I think that's great. Um, Another area that you talk about is developing or building workplace allies. So, how do you identify and nurture allies in the workplace, especially in a virtual world?
Yeah, can certainly be tougher, right? Because we don't have all of the,
The water
environmental.
cooler talk, right?
Yeah, the water cooler talk or just even observing, like, yeah, who's walking with who in the hallway or going to that meeting. We lack those cues. And I just wanna underscore why there's a whole chapter called the networking conversation because, again, do not put yourself in the position of only having your boss be your ally. You need diversification.
They
And
leave.
yes,
Yeah, they
exactly.
transfer out. They go somewhere else, and they're always like, "Wait, what? Huh?"
Exactly. And so there's a few different type of groups of people I suggest looking at building relationships with. The first is just other decision makers. That may be your boss's peers, it may be your skip level, it may be influential heads in other departments, clients, key vendors, important decision makers. The second group is powerful peers. So people that may be lateral to you that are top performers who may then become decision makers. And then last is the behind the scenes operators. And that's the people we often neglect, like the executive assistants, HR, IT. Those are very important contacts to have because I can't tell you how many times someone wants to have a tough conversation with their boss about, hey, I feel like I'm actually being biased against in terms of my growth here. And they don't really have a trusted resource in HR that they feel comfortable going to. And so having those 3 different groups of allies can give you a good balance across the organization.
Yeah, and I think, there's different tones that happen in the work day or the workplace. So if you have an in with, uh, your boss's executive assistant, as you mentioned there, they can kind of say, um, "Today is not the day you want to have that conversation. Yes, maybe you should schedule this for Friday." And I think it will go a lot better because if they're completely closed down because they're, consumed with some, you know, a major plant shut down, they lost a major customer, things that have nothing to do with you and your conversation, it can also, just open that door through these allies to better give you information you need. Yeah. So I love
100%.
that idea.
Yeah.
So this next question, in my book, Fire Your Hiring Habits, where we talk about how to find and keep the best people in an organization, um, maybe fully a third of the book just talks about culture and organizational differences and hierarchies. How do cultural differences in organizational hierarchies affect the strategies for managing up?
Yeah. And this is such a good question. Someone was asking me this the other day, and he was saying, he is in the Netherlands, and he said, here, we don't have a lot of hierarchy like you do in the States. And I think that's an assumption that all
Yeah,
workplaces in the
it
US are
depends on the
very.
company.
Yes. But even if you think about also other places in Europe have a much more assertive, direct, hierarchical cultures. And so you have to know where you're operating in and adjust your strategy accordingly.
Understand the rules of the game where you're playing.
That's right. And for example, if you are in a more hierarchical or traditional type of organization, then let's go back to the boundaries conversation for a minute. In that chapter, I talk about this idea of your pushback power, which is really the hidden leverage we have to deliver our boundaries. If your pushback power is on the lower side, then you need to be more tactful, maybe a bit softer about how you deliver your boundary. Versus if your pushback power is higher, you can be a little more direct and matter of fact about no, I can't do this. And so, one of those factors is the organizational culture. If the company is in crisis, if it's a very traditional sort of rank and file type place, then you may have to use an approach. I talk about something called the conditional yes, which is where you agree and you say, I'm happy to take this on, making it clear this is an exception, or making it clear I'm happy to take this on for the next quarter. Could we revisit when the time comes? And so again, you may have to be more deferential and accommodating given the context you're operating in, versus if you're in a much more flatter organization, you have a very long tenure, you're well respected, you have a very specialized skill set. That gives you a lot more leverage to say, no, this is not something I can take on. Go to this other team. They can help you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like that because you have to use the right tools for the right environment. I mean, in
Yes.
the hierarchy, I love the yes, but. I
Mhm.
mean, you could say, I understand this is the most important thing for you right now. I'm happy to take this on. These other 7 things that I'm working on are not going to get done.
Yes.
And are you aware of that? So it's again, I'm agreeing with you, but there are consequences in a hierarchical. But know your playing field. Yeah,
Yeah.
the good suggestions. So as I do, in various business environments, you talk about doing SWOT analysis, right? Very basic business tools, strength, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. And very often you sit there and go, oh, wait, all these threats are opportunities. You also talk about turning workplace conflicts into growth opportunities. Can you elaborate on how to do this?
Yeah. And earlier I was mentioning, you asked which are the most loaded conversations. And I also said feedback
Yeah,
because
this would be this one.
yeah. And I think that's because um, most often when we want to give feedback, it's about someone's personality. It's about you thinking your manager is a micromanager or they're scattered, for example, or um, yeah, it's usually about some sort of shortcoming in their personality, which again, I think we go into it either wanting to
And the
lash out.
relationship between your personalities, right?
Yes, that's right. That's right. And so to turn conflict into an opportunity, we need to focus on our ABCs. And what I mean by that is you are making an assumption about their behavior. You are assuming the label you're putting on it is my boss is a micromanager. But focus on B. What is the behavior that tells you that? They want oversight over every single email you send. And I was actually talking to a client about this last week who was saying my manager checks all of my messages. And then C is about what is the change you want to see. So if you're going to give feedback, you have to be willing to be part of the solution or offer a suggestion. Going back to reducing the cognitive load, and so that's what I mean by turning conflict into an opportunity. How can you look at this as a way to improve how you work together, the results the team gets, your systems, your processes, your efficiency? That's where it becomes from me versus you to we're on the same side against a problem that we're trying to solve.
Yeah. And you talk about, your assumptions about what they are, saying, hey, you're a blank, and I don't like that. All of a sudden, walls just go up. It's like, you're labeling me. I'm not that. That's not how I see me. Instead of I love the ABC framework. That's great because you're talking about a behavior. When you do this, I don't, can, could you do this instead? Because that would help me better understand what you want. The micromanaging thing, it just cracks me up because I used to run, uh, we used to develop navigation databases like you used to drive around and everybody does nowadays back in the early days. And so it was largely a software development area. And I used to walk up behind some of our team members while they were typing and I just whisper in their ear, space, period, dash. As my ultimate joke of, you want to see me micromanage? Watch this.
I will literally breathe down your neck.
I will literally come down your neck and I'll tell you each keystroke to strike. Oh, anyway, you got to have fun when you're at work. I mean, if you're in an environment that doesn't suit you, my environment has to be fun. And so if it's not enjoyable, then find somewhere else. So you also talk about when you're new to the workplace or the workforce. Or actually, new to the workforce. Let's talk about. So you're just entering, coming out of school, or just whatever school, whether it's high school, trade school, college, university, etc. What are the foundational skills that these newcomers to an industry should focus on to master managing up?
Oh, and if I wish they say you teach what you most need to learn, and I think that's true in many respects. And so I wish that I had developed more of that situational awareness and a greater understanding of what was happening around me, not just keeping my head down doing my job, but watching more of the dynamics, some of the politics, who was really a decision maker in a situation, where was money flowing. And in the first chapter, I tell a story about how I was laid off because I didn't have that situational awareness. I was working on a project that was perceived as a money pit because it wasn't the company's core product. It was sort of this ancillary innovation initiative that was a nice to have, but it wasn't crucial. And I had failed to build relationships. I had failed to follow what I say in the networking chapter with the real decision makers who had the ear of the CEO who could have saved me when time came. And so just having that awareness of, there are a stated way that things happen, and then there's the real way that things happen. And that's not playing politics. It's
No,
just
it's just
how all human dynamics work. Yeah.
that's right. I mean, we talk about creating. I tell people that the minute you've written down a plan, it's wrong.
Yeah.
It's our best guess, but it's wrong. It's not going to be exactly that way every step of the way. And the same goes true for, we write out how we want and how we expect things to work, but the day to day it gets a little fuzzy around that. Yeah. So, two more questions for the listeners at home. We're winding toward the end here, but so you include a lot of great research and evidence-based insight in your book. What of that surprised you the most during your writing process? Or did you just sit there and go, "Oh, I know these facts. I'm just gonna plug them in here."
Uh, no, definitely not. There's a few things that surprised me. We were talking earlier about questions and you were mentioning with the alignment conversation how even just expressing that interest is such a great way to build rapport. And that was something I came across that surprised me. It's called the question behavior effect, which is when you ask someone a question, they feel more in control of the response. It's much more likely to influence their behavior. And so that was really interesting to me because what I hope people take away from the book is that so much of this is not like big sweeping changes. It's really minor tweaks to how you're communicating with people, showing up. And if you can flip a statement to a question and help your boss feel more understood and control, that's going to go very far.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I love that. So, um, managing up, if the readers and listeners could take away one message, like we read, I don't know how many books, 20 to 120 books a year, depending on who you are. What do you want them to remember what's the one thing you want them to associate with the book?
I want readers to take away the fact that you teach people how to treat you. That's very important because a lot of us just feel powerless to what's going on around us at work. But when you understand these skills, when you can frame your ideas more persuasively, when you can put out the expectations about how you want to be communicated with, and again, do all of this diplomatically and tactfully in a way that builds respect, people come to value your ideas more. They respect your time. They're willing to compensate you for that as well. They're willing to promote you to bigger opportunities. And so that's what I would say is that you have much more power than you think you do to shape your work experience for the better.
Very good. So, You heard it here, folks. Get your copy of Managing Up by Melody Wilding and learn how to better succeed at who you want to be by working better with your supervisory crew. Melody, thank you for joining us today.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
This has been Fire Your Hiring Habits. If you want to empower your organization to reach new heights, go to johnwmitchell.com to find the techniques and tools you need to attract and retain the best team and boldly reimagine your workplace. Fire Your Hiring Habits with John Mitchell is a production of Forbes Books.